Okay, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and get us going. This is a great turnout. I'm really happy to see this many people joining me today. It's over half the class. So um, the go-to sessions aren't mandatory. I think I have that written in somewhere in the class, but I definitely encourage you to attend, and it's to your benefit because I try to clarify some of the concepts from class, but understanding that we're all in different time zones in the online classes and can't always make the same schedules. Um, I don't require it, and the archive is available later. But when I do see you in class, it makes me happy because I like to have this one-on-one time. Having said that, I know everybody's eager to get to the holiday break, so I'm going to try to make this as quick and painless as possible, but have just some information to go over and some stuff to look at for our week one content and exploration. As we're going along, I'm going to keep up with the chat log, but if you also want to unmute and ask questions, that's fine as well. We're not that big of a group, so feel free to jump right in. Okay, so this is Aesthetics and Theory of Communication, and much like the classes that came before it, the Introduction to Media Communications and New Media Tools, it's a foundation course. So a lot of the stuff we're going to cover is going to be preparing you for what's down the road. But I also noticed that a lot of students come into the class not really knowing what this is all about, and because the name is kind of unusual. So let me ask you guys, what does the word aesthetics mean in your experience, and from what you've in how you've seen it used in the past, if you have seen it used before?
Is it okay if I speak it?
Absolutely, yes.
Oh, I'm Tilly. In my past experience with aesthetics, it's the overall kind of vibe you get from looking or experiencing something. Um, how like clean or dirty it feels, what kind of colors are used, and just how the overall experience makes you feel.
Okay, yeah, that's excellent. Actually, um,
Oh, thanks.
I usually break it down. There's kind of the everyday casual use of the word aesthetics, like having something being aesthetically pleasing or having a certain aesthetic, meaning a style, like a Southwestern aesthetic. Um, the word itself actually comes from a branch of philosophy that is connected to art, but deals with the study of what makes something beautiful. How do we appreciate certain things as beautiful and other things not? And why do different people find different things beautiful? Um, and there's some examples on the screen of some pieces of classic art that are considered great works of art. One's the Jackson Pollock, very abstract painting. The other is by Monet, and it's much more um, immediately recognizable and maybe more approachable. Both are considered, again, great works of art. So this would be the study of why that is the case. But we are not really dealing with fine art in MCBS. We're dealing with media and modern media creation. So something as subjective as exploring beauty is a little too amorphous for us. It's too vague. We need concrete terms that we can deal with. And like Tilly described, this brings us to what's called applied media aesthetics. And now, rather than looking at what makes something specifically beautiful, we're looking at how we can combine different elements to evoke a vibe or a particular emotional response, perceptual reaction, as the definition says. Um, because as media experts or media professionals, things aren't always intended to be beautiful. Sometimes we need, our purpose is to evoke other emotions. Sadness has a purpose, anger, um, or beauty, or happiness, joy, sentimentality, whatever the case may be. If we're creating a piece of media, we want to convey a certain message and evoke a certain response. This is especially true in fields of advertising and PR and things of that nature, where you're trying to evoke a positive response, or if you're creating a PSA and you want to drum up sympathy or feelings of motivation to act towards a cause. Less so, ideally, in journalism, where you want to be objective and report the facts, but still good to be aware of how these things influence your viewers. So in the definition, it says a process in which we examine a number of media elements, how they interact, and our perceptual reactions to them. So by media elements, we're going to be talking about things like the subjects that you're showing in your imagery, the verbal message that you're conveying, either through text or through actual audio recording. The use of color is a big part of this, and we'll explore that in week 2, especially in how that's used in advertising and cinema to influence emotion. And later on, we'll get into rules of composition, how you can direct the viewer's focus, and using typefaces to create a style, since we're focused less on cinematography and more on media with a purpose, in the sense of PR and journalism and so forth. That becomes more relevant. I keep meaning to update this diagram, because the more I look at it, the more I realize it's just crazy. But this is a breakdown of the class and how it's going to work. If you look at this as vertical columns, this is how it's intended week by week. There's 3 activities per week. They're exploration, a Photoshop practice, and the mood board project, which I think is called the visual mission statement in FSO. And this is the structure this is how we're going to explore that idea of combining media elements to evoke a response. Each week you'll have an exploration activity. One's due tonight. Usually these are relatively brief, usually some readings, maybe some lynda.com lessons to look at, followed by an activity that lets you apply some of those ideas. And that sort of sets the stage for what's to come the rest of the week. And then there's going to be a Photoshop practice. I'm assuming that everyone in the class is a beginner with Photoshop. That's probably not true. A lot of you have probably worked with it before. Actually, has anybody worked with Photoshop to any extent in the past? Okay, Brandon has. Okay, well, this will be an introduction, because I'm really focusing on the absolute beginner and working up. Sometimes I've had students come in who are working professional graphic artists, and when that's the case, then it kind of is on them to challenge themselves a little more. But we're going to learn some Photoshop, kind of help you get started. So later on, when you get to the graphic design course and some other courses, you'll have some hands-on time under your belt. And also, I'm using those Photoshop practices as a way to further apply these ideas. So visual storytelling in week 1. You'll create some simple visual stories in the exploration or in the Photoshop practice. And the mood board project I'll get to in a minute. It's going to be the overarching project for the month, but it's going to be a way to slowly build up applying all of the different concepts that we've covered. Week 2, I mentioned we're going to cover color, color theory. So this is some principles that are used within both the fine art world as well as the commercial art world of how to select colors and combine colors to create a specific effect, give your imagery a specific energy. A little bit of color psychology, just how we respond to certain colors. And then we'll explore color manipulation in Photoshop. And in week 3, there's 2 topics, typography and visual hierarchy, which you'll again work with in the Photoshop practice and the mood board assignment. Any questions so far? I'm just kind of barreling ahead. Okay. Has anybody ever heard of a mood board? Yeah, hopefully it will be some pretty cool stuff and get you started with some cool things. Okay, Tilly has heard of a mood board before. Do you want to comment on what they are in your experience? What?
I was working in, sorry, I just hopped onto the mic.
You're fine.
I was working in a theater, and so we would use mood boards to convey what we wanted the set or costumes to look like, or in my case, the lighting. So
Okay.
it was just a collage of photos for the most part.
Yeah, it was a collection of ideas, right? Of kind of what you had in mind.
Yeah, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Rod mentioned vision boards, and they're kind of similar in a way. Vision boards tend to be more personal, sort of like putting together kind of a visualization of things that you want to bring in, like want in your life, changes that you want to make, or kind of give yourself personal direction. Mood boards are similar, but more specifically geared towards a given project. My understanding is that they started in interior design. So designers would collect images of different types of furnishings or draperies and carpeting and so forth that they felt was relevant to a project they were working on, an interior design project. So things that would look suitable for a particular room that they're decorating, maybe fabrics and textures, and it might have been an actual physical board, a physical collage that they were pinning things to. It was then adopted by graphic designers who used more of a digital format for it, which we'll be using as well. So this example that I have on the screen right now is one that I found online, and it's from a graphic designer that is collecting ideas for a project that they're working on. And the images that they have here are not images that they will actually use in their project, but instead are inspirations or have a particular style that they feel is relevant to the direction they want to go. And they can refer to that for ideas, for inspirations, and for reference to see how a particular thing is done. They've also collected different typefaces that they feel fit the purpose and the nature of the project, as well as a color palette. And in fact, these are all elements that we're going to be working with as well in our own mood boards. Oftentimes a mood board will be, especially in a graphic design sense or a web design sense, will be something that's online and shareable. So it could be a Google drawing, or there are actually some specific apps for making mood boards. Even a Google slideshow or something along those lines would work. For our purposes this month, I'm going to have you use a Pages document just to keep things standardized. And since we're going to be building it up piece by piece, it'll just makes it more structured. It looks something like this. It's actually changed a little bit since this time, but since this one was created. And yeah, Rod, it is very similar in purpose to a storyboard. It's actually sort of a pre-storyboard. You would really establish your creative direction with the mood board before even moving towards a storyboarding stage of development. So it's extremely early project planning stage process. So the idea is that the subject that we're going to be working with is your personal mission statement, which, if I recall, you wrote a personal mission statement at the end of New Media Tools, or was it the end of Introduction to Media Communications, I believe, Mike Dunn's class. Yeah, and hopefully you still have access to that. If you don't, that's okay, because it's your personal mission statement, and you probably know it pretty well. It doesn't have to be the same one you wrote 2 months ago. But the concept that we're going to work with is, if you were to take that mission statement and visualize it through as say a poster design, and you wanted to communicate all of the feeling and the values and goals and ideas of that, how would you do it? What imagery would you use? What style would you use? And how would you apply color and symbolism and so forth? That's going to be your visual mission statement, that image that you create. And we're going to use the mood board to plan that out. And we're going to do that in stages. So week 1, and this isn't due until, I want to say, Monday or Tuesday with the weird schedule. It might be even later than that. For week 1, you're coming up with your concept. You're going to tell me what your mission statement is. That's something that's changed since this one was created. And then describe some visual ideas that would capture that mission in a visual sense. And that's going to be a written component that's going to be over here on the left-hand column. But along with that, you're going to collect some images that give me an idea of what you have in mind. So again, these aren't images that you would ever necessarily use in your project. Maybe some of them might make their way into the project in the end. But these are all inspirations and ideas that you're collecting. Remember, our goal with aesthetics is the interaction of different elements. So now you're deciding on those elements, which elements you'll use. So right, the first step is to just come up with concepts, visual concepts. This particular student has organized her image collage into categories of textures, concept illustrations, color examples, typefaces, and so on. This is up to you how you want to organize it, whatever makes sense to you and to your goals. I would encourage you to include notes and comments to explain what these images mean to you, why you picked that particular image, how it relates to your mission statement and to the way you'll visualize that mission statement. these little yellow boxes are actually comments that she's embedded. The way to approach this is to imagine that you're working with a team. Say you're the creative director, and you're leading a team of designers, but you have to communicate your creative vision. They won't know your creative vision unless you are clear about it. So that's what these notes are for. As we move ahead, you'll start to formulate a color palette, and this is kind of your personal branding. You're creating a standard color palette to represent your personal brand as a media professional, or as whatever other kind of professional you wish to present yourself as, or even just in your personal life. And again, with notes and comments to show that you are understanding the concepts of color theory and making valid choices. Week 3, you'll decide on typefaces that suit the personality and tone of your design. And all this comes together in week 4 when you use all those Photoshop skills you've been working on developing and put all these pieces together into an actual design. And this is her final visual mission statement design. She wanted the worn, weathered wood to be a symbol of authenticity, but wanted to have the image show someone standing on the edge, about to take a leap. And that's the slogan. Rod asks about the mood board templates. Yes, I do provide the templates. It's linked under the first week's visual mission statement assignment, so you'll find that there. I've had some students have trouble with the pages, with pages in particular. I do have a Word version of the template as well, but it doesn't have all the features that Pages does, but it is available if you need it. But yep, so you'll find that linked under there. You can download it and customize it. So if I go, let me go back really quick if I can. I have an injured finger, so using the touchpad is tricky right now. You can see how we go through each of these topics and they all feed into the mood board. In the end, that all comes together. So the exploration ideas, the Photoshop practice, all lend themselves to creating that final project. Any questions on the nature of the mood board and how that is going to work? It should be interesting, and you know, a lot of room for creativity and personal expression. At the same time, from my standpoint, I'm looking for you to show that you're getting what we're talking about in class. So it's kind of a combination of those two aspects of academic and creative expression. Another just kind of side note is that when you select these, the color palette as well as the typefaces, you can hang on to this information because later on, especially in, I think it's the editing for the web class, possibly the graphic design course, you're going to create some personally branded media, things like a portfolio website, business cards, and so forth, and you can apply these elements to that. So if you're really comfortable with the typefaces you selected to represent you, you can make use of those at those later dates. So it's meant to kind of tie in down the road. There you go. Yeah, and Brooke mentions it kind of takes her back to yearbook editing. And I can definitely see some tie in there. So I start this class off in week one with visual storytelling, and this is meant to be a continuation of the general storytelling ideas that you looked at in new media tools, and now really focusing on use of imagery to tell a story, and looking at how imagery and the verbal components work together to give more information together than either component would give on their own. Has anybody had a chance to look at the Linda lesson? I think it's about a half hour long on visual storytelling. Okay, yeah, I figured most everyone would be getting to it. Brandon has watched it, so that's good. She goes over, some examples and just ideas of what makes a story, what elements go into a story, and how that can be used to convey a message, and some strategies for grabbing the viewer's attention and maintaining that attention. This is a pretty simple example. The photo itself is of some natural caverns, and while it's pretty spectacular in and of itself, there's not really a story of the cave being told. But by simply putting this little phrase, "Here I come, ready or not," suddenly there's a lot more meaning. There's something happening, and we're involved because we're the ones experiencing this. It's a game of hide and seek. A lot of most of us probably are familiar with how that works. And Brandon, being the one who watched it, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Do you remember what the elements were? The elements of story that author or that Linda instructor listed?
Okay. I'm not sure.
No problem.
I don't really remember.
Okay, there were two things that she identified that were essential to telling a story, and they were, one, a protagonist. So you need at least a main character, the hero of the story, or the sometimes the victim, depending on the story, and a story problem or challenge. So you need a character, and you need them to be experiencing something, usually a problem or challenge or something that's visually interesting to witness. Not all images are stories, and you don't always have to use visual storytelling to communicate a message. But we're exploring storytelling because it is a strategy that really engages an audience in ways that other means of conveying information do not. It brings in some emotional connections and mental challenge that are very unique to this form of media. All right, who's our protagonist in this case? And what's the story challenge? Yes, the snowman is our protagonist. And this is a little bit of a horror movie scenario for him. And he is about to get murked. I haven't heard that term before, but I'm going to say that sounds pretty accurate. The snow plow is coming his way, and he is in a panic, understandably. So even without the need to be told what's happening, we were able to infer that snowman was about to get murked just based on what we're seeing. And that is the ideal situation for a visual story. These details down in the corner are almost irrelevant. I mean, that's just the advertising component to give it a context. And here our protagonist is God himself, and for whatever reason, he and the angels are looking pretty bored. And so just at the right time, they're delivered a handheld gaming console to give them some entertainment. Okay, this one is a little bit different now. Who in this case is the protagonist? And what's the story challenge? Okay, Rod says a parent. And this is actually an advertisement for chocolate candy. And the tagline down there says, decide if your child deserves them. So yeah, it is a parent, but we don't really see the parent, do we? They're not pictured in the visual story. Instead, we're kind of put into the role of the parent who has stumbled upon this scene. And now we're presented with the question, does this child get punished for defacing the living room wall, or are they rewarded because they reproduced an amazing work of art? So oftentimes you can put your viewer into the role of the protagonist. Or taught the value of hard work by cleaning it up. Yeah, that is another option as well. But you'll see this strategy used pretty often is putting the viewer into that role. Basically, they are the ones posed with the challenge, and so it's a little bit more mentally engaging, like a hypothetical question or rhetorical question posed to them that they're naturally engaged to find a solution to. I always forget that I had included this. This is a little illustration. Is anybody familiar with the rule of thirds, especially in photography? Okay, good. Yeah, never center your subject. And I'd almost be hesitant to say never, because there is a purpose for the rule of thirds, and there are reasons to not use the rule of thirds. But it's all depending upon your intention for the image. The rule of thirds offsets your subject from the center and allows you to show their place within the context of their environment. So if we had centered the girl as a portrait in this image, it would not be you wouldn't really see the context of the situation as well. But moving her off to the side, we get to see the relationship to the environment, and it tells more of a story. If all your intention is to simply show the details of an object, then a centered portrait is fine, like a still life, or even a portrait of a person. But the rule of thirds, which says you divide it into thirds, the image into thirds vertically and horizontally, and where those lines fall are the ideal placement for your main subject, especially where they intersect. Something you'll get into in more detail in the graphic design course, but something to be aware of here as well. And I don't know why I have this guy again, but we'll move on. A factor that I've mentioned a few times, and that's important in storytelling especially, is that of emotion, making an emotional connection to your audience. We as human beings tend to be very empathic beings. I mean, we feel empathy for our fellow humans. We are inclined to feel the emotions that are expressed around us. And if you think about when we're newborn babies, we learn to express ourselves by imitating parents or the other adults. You see babies mimicking the facial expressions and so forth, and that's actually hardwired in our brains. There's what's called mirror neurons that allow us to reflect the feelings and expressions given to us, and it doesn't really stop when we grow up. We just stop imitating the facial expressions most of the time. The point being that you can make use of that in your media, in your storytelling. By showing expressions of emotion, you will help evoke those feelings in your audience. So you'll see this a lot of times with the expressions of the characters in a TV show or on a commercial. And the trick is that it doesn't have to be a human face. It can be a balding cat or this little very dignified little mutt literally in prison, because those are prison bars, with his very stoic face and a lot of emotion. Pretty safe to say that both of these images, particularly the balding cat, but also the puppy, have been modified in some ways to make them look more human, to evoke that emotion. You can do the same thing with cartoon characters, though. We are so hardwired to recognize faces that it doesn't take a whole lot. Even a angry-looking electrical socket I've seen used before. So the use of facial expressions and shows of emotion is a way to imbue emotion into your visual storytelling. I have these slides occasionally. I don't know if I have to pause for questions, but you're welcome to ask at any point. So I've touched on some of the strategies for engaging your audience through storytelling. One is emotion, expressing emotion within the story. What almost all of them come down to is intellectual challenge. Pose a puzzle for your audience to decipher. Something surprising. We saw the cartoon earlier with the cartoon of God on his throne, looking bored with a hand presenting a gaming console, and that's kind of absurd, humorous surprise. It's something we wouldn't expect to see. It can also be very shocking surprise, though, and we'll see some examples of that. Humor and poignancy, again, kind of pulling on your heartstrings. Suspense is a sense of mystery, the question of what happens next. Someone kind of left in a cliffhanger is an expression of suspense. And symbolism and visual metaphor are very similar. These are imagery that have meaning based on our oftentimes on our culture, on societal standards, things that we've come to recognize as having meaning. And by the way, the examples I show on my slides are ones that I collect from the exploration activities. Usually I would be using yours, but since the schedule's a little mixed up, I don't have yours yet. So, so that's what these are. I don't really like this one. It just doesn't have a lot to talk about. But this one is fun, and it is that idea of surprise and as well as humor. It's a matter of context. Danger is just a matter of distance. I think it is intended to promote their collision avoidance system, but it's kind of using the visual metaphor of this little dog. Danger is up close and pretty scary, but once you see it at a distance, it's not so scary at all. I'd like to hear your observations on this one. And I'm not sure how large or clear this image is on your side, but what do you see here, and what are your feelings as you explore this? Rod sees creepy faces. And says maybe it's about child kidnapping or awareness. It's on the right track. Or hide and seek, which we saw earlier with the cavern as well. So there are these faces, and you can't. Okay, the text in the corner is very small, and this will give some indication of what this is all about. It says, "Find out what's behind the clothes you buy." Labor rights, human rights. So yeah, it's about sweatshops. It's about child labor. So you see this sweater, this woven fabric, that behind it are these little children's eyes. And it is unsettling, it is creepy in that sense, because you don't expect to see that. And then it's sort of like, oh, why are they back there? Why are they looking at me? And it is a kind of literal representation of what's behind the clothes that you buy. So a little bit of surprise, kind of in a somewhat morbid sense. And then once you realize what it's about, there's definitely some poignancy there. And that idea of surprise, and this is an example of kind of shocking surprise. We have this very evocative headline, "I wish my son had cancer." And you say, well, why would anybody wish such a thing? And between that and this really heart-wrenching image down here, you can't help but be pulled into this this poster's design. And this actually has a literal story besides the visual story. It tells the story of this child who has a very rare disease that is so rare that it really hasn't been researched, and there isn't a lot of treatment available. But whereas cancer has had so much focus that the odds would be much better if it was cancer. So it's kind of a play on that idea, but in a way that's just very attention grabbing. This use of really emotionally evocative titles and headlines is something that we'll see again and again. When we get to week 3 and we're talking about visual hierarchy, you'll start seeing that some of the really emotionally charged words will be emphasized by making them larger or a different color, different typeface or something that makes them stand out. And that's a way of really driving home that emotional impact with your audience. Are there any questions so far? Any of the stuff we've looked at up to now? Just a few more examples to go, and we'll be wrapping up. This is a slide that I really wish I had earlier, because I mentioned that it doesn't take a human face to express human emotion, and this is certainly the case here with this sad armchair. Your home will miss you this summer, and it looks so sad because its owners are not home. And the ad is for holiday deals, vacation deals. But the visual story is about this poor little chair. And that's an important distinction as well, especially when we look at advertising, which we're going to look at it. You're going to be looking at advertising for this exploration. The subject of the ad is not always even a part of the story. So this is about a travel agency with vacation deals. That doesn't really take place in the story. The story is about this sad chair missing his family. So when I asked you to identify the protagonist, it's not necessarily going to be this company or whatever the case may be. And that's just something I've seen before. So yeah, and Rod made the comment that he thinks this works better than this a blatant ad. It's more inviting, and that's the idea. You could just say, we've got great vacation deals with discount prices, and that expresses all the information you necessarily need, but it's not as interesting and doesn't kind of grab attention as well. I had realized that all of my examples of visual metaphors were very dark and depressing, so I've made a point of grabbing some that are a little more fun and cute, and this is one of those. What would be your interpretation of this, of the symbolic meaning of what we see here? We got the sun and the moon wearing diapers and holding hands. And it hits Rod right in the feels. But what message do you think that this image is expressing? It's 24 hours, day and night. The tiny little tagline says, with you in games and dreams. So up to 12 hours of absorption. So the idea is that it'll go the entire day and be good throughout that time period. So the day and the night are holding hands because they've shared that. Well, I almost said they're sharing a diaper, which sounds pretty nasty, but that's the idea. And this is what I was talking about with the darker, the darker and more morbid uses of symbolism. What is a more recognizable symbol for a country other than its flag? The national flag is iconic. You know, we easily see our national flag and know that it's about our country. And this is the flag of Morocco. And it is literally covering up cases of torture. So it is taking that statement and expressing it in a very literal way that is, as you say, it's incredibly powerful. It's a really strong and impactful image. So use of symbolism, of metaphor. They don't always have to make logical sense as long as there is a sense of symbolism. This one is the visual metaphor for farm to table This actually is not a visual story because there isn't a story taking place, but it is that idea of the visual metaphor of the symbol, the pitchfork with the silverware stem. Yeah, it conveys information, like a deeper level of information than the individual images themselves. Oh, I haven't seen that one, but that is the idea, isn't it? It's farm to fridge, farm to table. And again, these are some that I've collected from the different explorations that my students have done. You have a case where the hair is kind of telling the story of, maybe giving an idea of the personality or the of the individual or the experiences that they have had. It looks like a tropical vacation has been going on. Very adventurous. Yes, could be Jamaica, although the lion is a little out of place there, but the idea is, it's some exotic location. Right, and what's kind of an old technique for falling asleep is counting sheep, right? And in this case, the mattress is so comfortable that even the sheep have fallen asleep. All right, any thoughts or questions so far? I think that might be, yep, that is my last example. So this is what we're going to be working with. Tonight, your exploration involves looking at a website called welovead.com. It's just an archive of advertisement designs, and finding one that tells a story and looking for that protagonist and that story problem and what kind of strategies they use. And that'll be it for the week, but it's up to you if you want to work on some of your Photoshop stuff. During the vacation, you are not obligated to. Starting off, you're going to learn how to use some basic tools, so adding text to an image in Photoshop, as well as cropping and things like that. Oh, what is it that's confusing? The holiday schedule or Photoshop? Or both? There's probably a valid argument for both. Okay, well, I'm certainly here if you have if you get caught up, hung up on any particular thing in Photoshop. The lesson in Linda is pretty good about starting from basic stuff and working up, but certainly understanding that this is your first time working with Photoshop, and if you do need some coaching, I'd be happy to meet with you. Oh, thank you so much for that offer, Rod, as well. Right, so I'm going to be traveling over the holiday break and going up to my my hometown. But I am helping to keep up with email, so I'll be checking that regularly if you do need to get in touch over the break. I wonder why you're working on schoolwork over the break, but I'll still answer. But aside from that, that's what I had prepared for tonight, and I really appreciate you all joining me.